Today we are going to be discussing my top 5 tips for beginner watercolorists. The first tip is about cleaning your brush. So first let's get some paint on this brush to illustrate our point. So let's say that we're using some indigo. So a very concentrated color here. Go paint some out. So quite a dark color. So if I wanted to go right to yellow from indigo, put it right in my water, and here's the trick. You swirl in a figure 8, okay? And you can go very fast doing this. So if you look here, if I go and paint it out, there's no color on my brush. I use one for cleaning my brushes. This would be my rinse water. And then I use the other one for getting clean water. Okay, so let's move on to tip number 2 here. If you only had light blue, and you were painting an area light blue, but then you wanted some areas of it to be a darker blue, but you didn't have a darker blue, what could you do? So here is tip number 2, and it may seem like kind of a backwards answer to the problem, but my second tip for you is when you can, buy darker colors. And as you can see, it's darkest over here on the left, and just by adding water, it gets quite a bit lighter across to the right. Now this is almost one shade, but if you count them, like 1, 2, 3, 4, at least 5 different shades of blue in just this one blue by adding water. Now, in contrast, this blue underneath it, quite a bit of a lighter blue, and this is the darkest. This is like 1 shade, 2 shades, maybe 3 shades, okay? So 3 shades compared to 5, and this was just one swatch test. So darker colors can always be made lighter. They're watercolors. You can always add water and make a ton of shades of one color from a dark color. But if you're starting with a light color, there are going to be less shades that you can make, and that's just the way it is. So when you have the option, I would recommend getting the darker shade because you can always make the darker shade lighter, but you can't make the lighter shade darker. When I finish a painting, I always let my leftover colors dry in my palette completely. So that's tip number 3. Keep your palettes dirty. So watercolor can completely dry, all the water can evaporate out of it, and it will reactivate very easily. On to tip number 4. Do light pencil sketches if you're going to be working with watercolors. It is going to show through to the same degree that you leave it the second you paint over it. Okay, on to our final tips. Use actual watercolor paper. What makes watercolor so special, you ask? Watercolor paper. Well, basically, the paper is different because it's got something called sizing in it. All paper specifically made for watercolor has this. Basically, the sizing hangs out in the paper and makes it so that it can take a lot more water and abuse than your average paper without sizing, without warping, and without pilling. Okay, so that's about it for today, everybody.